I was getting home with my brother from school when we saw a monster just off in the trees right by our house. I was frozen in my tracks, and then my brother saw it too. We never saw this creature in full, but we saw this long snout and long claws holding onto the trees behind the branches, watching us. Then, I got the feeling that it knew that we saw it because it started growling. My brother grabs my arm and motions to me that we need to go book it for the house. I was afraid that whatever this creature was going to chase us, but we risked it anyway, and we started taking off running. I have no idea if it was just a wild animal or something more sinister, but whatever it was, I knew I had to get home as quickly as possible. My brother and I ran up the hill towards our house. We didn't even make it to the top when we heard a loud noise next to us. This creature was following us closely in the trees. It was paralleling us perfectly and keeping up with us with no problems. We were so scared that we didn't even stop to think about what it could be. We just kept running to the front door until we finally got out of range of the creature's sight. We got in the house, slammed the door, and locked it. We could hear a bunch of thrashing around in the trees next to the house, and it went on for a while. My brother and I were scared. We weren't even sure what to do or who to call. Here we are, 12 and 14, and there's a friggin' monster in the trees next to our house. Our parents would never believe us. We hid in our bedrooms, waiting for our mom to get home. My brother and I grabbed the biggest knives we could find and hunkered down. Maybe 20 minutes later, and the noise finally began to die down. Then, it got dead silent outside. Because this was in January, the sun sets here at like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the evening time, so by now it was already dark. My mother got home first, closer to 5:45, and when she came in, she seemed to be spooked or bothered by something. We were nervous to say anything because we were still freaked and didn't want to say anything to her, but she obviously was bothered by something. She acted off because she usually greets us and asks us how our day was, but she didn't this time. She walks right into the kitchen and gets on the phone with what we can discern was the police, talking quietly and looking out the window. My brother and I are standing on top of the stairwell, looking at each other with eyes as big as saucer plates. Something was going on, and in my 12-year-old mind, I was thinking that creature was still out there. My older brother was brave enough to actually go downstairs and ask her what was going on, but she wouldn't answer the question and just reassured him everything was okay. He tells her, "We saw it too, Mom, coming home from school. It was hiding there in the trees." And then I hear him just going off and off, telling her everything that we saw and everything that happened. I was boggled that she wouldn't just acknowledge what we had to say and just left the conversation and walked away. She had a glass of wine and ignored us the rest of the night. It was bizarre. My mother never acted that way. But this was years ago, and I don't know if what we saw had anything to do with that giant animal creature or what. That was a nightmare, and I hope to never relive that again. That's my strange experience. I don't know what we saw or what kind of animal it could have been. It's never been talked about in my family since. Is it possible that it could have been a dogman? I don't know, since I don't really know anything about monsters or cryptids or any of that. But it certainly scared me and my brother to death, and I'm glad that we never encountered it again. I will tell you about the visual encounter that I had with what I believe to be a dogman. I used to have a bunch of thick woods around my old place, and I spent a lot of time hiking in them. I was kind of a loner anyway, so it worked out for me great. My first inkling was that I heard a deer, so I turned around to look, and I seen this creature's face peering at me through the trees. Let me lay the cards out for you here. If you've ever seen those werewolf movies where the creature looks half man, half wolf, short snout, but the face is still very human, that's exactly what I saw. This thing was my height, and it was peering at me through the trees, and I saw more of it than I wanted to see. As soon as I saw it, I flinched and screamed because it looked so horrific. Then it turned around and ran off through the trees. This wasn't far from my house either, maybe 500 feet at the very most, so this kind of shook me. This was just a calm spring afternoon in June, back in '88. I had no idea that an animal like that would ever be hanging out in my backyard in the woods. Literally zero idea. So I run back to my house, call my friend. I'm going crazy, telling him over the phone, "You need to get over here. There's this crazy wolf-looking monster out in the backyard of my woods. Let's go kill this son of a gun." He comes over 20 minutes later. We go out there and it's still light out, and he just starts heading out deep into the woods, far beyond where I'm at now. Now, I'm going to explain to you something. Where my house was at the time, it was still really new development. So once you backed into the woods, that was my house. There was a small hill you had to cross over, and then it dipped into a larger valley that would span a few more miles before you hit any more neighborhoods. This friend of mine runs back there, not even 15 minutes back there, and I hear him start firing off his revolver and screaming. He comes running back, white as a sheet, and tells me he saw the thing, fired multiple shots off at this creature, and it charged him, nearly slicing his belly open. Now I'm thinking, oh man, I gotta get the hell out of here. So he offers me his couch to sleep on while I figure all this stuff out. So, long story short, I ended up crashing out on his couch for a while, all the while trying to go back to my house during the day, packing up everything and selling what I could, just to try and get rid of the damn house. I had lived there for 6 months before, and it was a very small one-bedroom house, mind you. I wasn't wanting to deal with it, so I just up and left the house permanently, and left the area for good. Not one of my better moments that I'm particularly proud of, but I felt backed into a corner. When people are pushed into a corner like that, I mean, what are your options? I didn't feel safe. I did not feel comfortable going back there. I had been going back there 4 months at this point, and now all of a sudden, I'm having to deal with some unknown animal. I didn't even bother with the police, because that would have been a joke. They would accuse me of drinking and being a drunk. I didn't expect my friend to come over and charge back there like Arnold Schwarzenegger in the movie The Predator, but he wanted to check it out for himself, and I felt better having him by my side because he was an experienced, tanky kind of individual. You know, he's a big dude. He lifted weights, didn't take crap from anybody. He's still that way now, a very alpha male kind of personality, but now that he's older, he's got quite the bit of gray on his face. During this time though, we were just both in our 20s, just fresh out of college. So the plot thickens even more. I moved out of the area, and then my friend begins calling me and telling me weird stuff is going on around that entire neighborhood. When I first moved in that neighborhood, houses were very sparse and far apart. Now in 2020, it's fully developed. I don't even think those backwoods are even there anymore because it's all houses in development now. He had other close friends in the neighborhood, but he kept tabs with me. It was a very close-knit kind of neighborhood. Everybody just kind of knew each other. The kind of neighborhood that when there's a big barbecue, everybody was invited. That's just how it was in the 80s. Not at all like nowadays where nobody talks to each other or can make eye contact. Anyway, word got around that people were seeing a strange animal sniffing around their garbage, trying to get into the back of their house. So, the police started investigating, thinking there were robbers trying to get into the houses. But I guess they themselves had a few encounters with the same creature. A close friend of his was telling him that he would hear gunshots at night from the police, and then before you know it, a strong curfew was in place for that neighborhood, telling people not to go outside after 8 p.m. Just crazy stuff that you would only see out of a movie. Well, come to pass in about 4 months, and it finally ended. But from June to October, this kind of stuff was going on. Cats and dogs would go missing, people would have sightings here and there. Real Hollywood kind of stuff. Even though the friend that I had helped me out didn't live in that neighborhood, he still kept his good old revolver close to him at all times, fully loaded. He was not a risk taker. At least not when it came to this kind of thing. I hope you enjoyed my story. I've only actually gotten to tell a handful of people about it, because so seldom few people even believe what I have to say. I've told a few other big YouTube channels now, so maybe my story is out there. But if not, and you choose to read this, I hope your readers enjoy it. Before I end this story, my friend and I are still doing well, and he is still tough as nails. We have both moved away from that area. He's now living down in Austin, Texas, and I live in Missouri currently. At the time, this was in central Pennsylvania, where all of this took place, back in 1988.